Hi everybody, it's Mrs. Haugen. Today we're going to talk just briefly about two brand new math concepts. They are parallel lines and square corners. Parallel lines are simply two or more lines that no matter how long the lines are, they will never be able to touch or they will never cross. So here are two examples of parallel lines. You can see that the top picture, the lines go side to side, right? They are horizontal. And the bottom lines, even though they're crooked, they're the same crooked. They're the same diagonal. So at each point on a line, they have to be the same distance apart. If they're closer at one point or farther away at one point, then the lines will not be parallel. So again, these pictures on this page are examples of parallel lines. These lines, however, are not parallel. The first picture that you see, the lines are already crossing. So already we know these lines are not parallel. Now, the pictures that you see at the bottom, even though they're not touching yet, we know that if we extend this line, if we made this line longer, that they would eventually touch because they're not the same kind of diagonal. And the same with this picture on the bottom right. We know that if we were to extend these lines and make them longer, that they would eventually cross. Because even though they're both diagonal, they're not the same diagonal. You can see how this part is really wide, but this part is really skinny. So that tells me that these lines are not parallel because eventually they're going to touch or cross. Now, the next thing I want to talk about are square corners. Now, square corners are simply corners of a shape that are square. So these shapes that you will see on this slide have square corners. So this rectangle and this square, you can see the corners that are marked here, they are squares because the sides of the shape are perfectly horizontal and perfectly vertical. And that gives the corners the square shape. So these shapes have square corners. Now the shapes I will show you next do not have square corners. So on the bottom left here, we can see that even though this side is perfectly horizontal, this one, this red one right here, is not. It is not straight up and down. It is a little bit diagonal. And when you have a side that is diagonal, your corners will not be square. If you look over here at the parallelogram, same things. Even though the top and bottom are perfectly horizontal, actually the top and bottom lines are actually parallel because the blue sides are crooked, because they are not exactly straight up and down. That means the corners cannot be square. And the same with the rhombus on this side. The top and bottoms, or the sides, are not perfectly vertical or perfectly horizontal. So the corners cannot be squares. So again, these shapes that you see here do not have square corners. That's it. I hope you learned a little bit more today about parallel lines and square corners.